listen up. Everybody who likes the FD, who gets all horny for Initial D and original Fast and the Furious and all that big boost and all that big power and all that blobby late 90s stuff, the guys who just can't stop gooning for, oh, Rotary's FDs are the best. They're the best positive things, and nothing has been the same since the FD, and the FD was great. And and you gotta keep punching my balls every downstroke. None of that exists. All of the rotary culture that you love, that's still alive from the FD, owes itself to the success of the FC. If this car from the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, if the FC wasn't a success, all knowledge of rotaries would have died then. Rotaries would have died before Windows 95 came out if this car, this little turbo, failed. But it didn't. In many ways, the FC is superior to the FD because it kept the rotary dream alive. And more specifically, it proved that rotaries could have power and also torque. Now, is the FC a good car? Heck no. Ooh, this thing smells like a lawnmower every single time you start up. You literally have to pour 2-stroke mix in the tank to keep those apex seals sealing. But the sound this thing makes. Oh, come on, just listen to this for a second. Oops, sorry. When that blow-off valve goes, it's like the car hits. It's like it hits the brakes. It's fun though. Hissing and fluttering at the same time. I mean, people say that rotaries don't make torque. This one does. 216 pound-feet of it. What? Come on. 236 horsepower. And that's before this thing was tuned. The sensation of driving an FC is like driving a rubber band. Or maybe a better analogy would be driving an entire box of rubber bands. Ever sit with a whole pile of rubber bands when you're little and maybe you're grounded or maybe you're in some place where your entertainment cannot be satiated by electronic means. Maybe you're in a waiting room. Maybe you're in a rubber room. And all you have is rubber bands. So you pull them back and launch them. And you pull them back and you launch them. And you're just flinging rubber bands across the room. Or maybe you have one of those rubber band guns. Anyway, that is what driving an FC feels like. You're constantly pulling up boost into this and just riding the fun as it launches you throughout each gear. But also enjoying the snapback when that boost suddenly cuts off. Because unlike, let's say, a V8, where there's a lot of rotational mass going on there that keeps energy moving through the flywheel, or flex plate if you will, to keep the kinetic energy pushing the car forward when you're off the throttle, a 2-rotor with a turbo is very, very small and very light. So when the second the throttle closes, there's no real rotational mass to keep you moving. So it's almost like an electric car that has regen cranked up to max. The second you're off the throttle, you're just, ugh. Not that it matters much, because all you want to do is modulate the throttle so you can feel this thing build boost and blow it off and build boost and flutter like crazy. Now it is, unfortunately, early 90s Mazda, and that's not exactly like early 90s Toyota or Honda. It's kind of crusty, kind of old, and a lot of switches don't work. So it's more of a Mad Max feeling than a time capsule in this car from 1991. But in that, there's some quality feelings of this and the Fox body, to be honest. Although this thing drives way better than a Fox body. Oh my God, it's so much better. But if you drive a rotary, And if you're thinking of going down this path, and you probably are, because you want triangles all the time.
You want to define your life by Doritos.
You want to shove your rotary facts into everybody's conversation and start bumming everybody else out at the gay bar. You're going to be that one guy at the gay bar who can't stop talking about triangles.
That reminds me of my rotary, and this reminds me of my rotary, and your rectum reminds me of my rotary.
Anyway, but just like your kinks, a rotary engine is a labor of love. Or if not a labor of love, then a matter of principle, because once you've yoked yourself to the task of keeping a rotary engine happy, you have to see it through. It's like, okay, son, you wanted this. No, you asked for this. Finish everything in front of you. I'm your dad. Clean your plate. So, the engine. Sexy. This is a 1.3 liter 2-rotor turbo that's positioned about 10 degrees toward the driver's side to clear the steering rack, so you're not just hitting the exhaust like a speed bag. Now, power-wise, again, you are making around 236 horsepower and 216 pound-feet of torque, with fuel economy rated at a not great, not terrible 14 city, 23 highway, and 18 combined. It's matched to a 5-speed manual transmission that treats you better than this engine does, because why would you do this to yourself? Yes, the apex seals need constant lubrication. Just like your fupa, if you have it in a cock and ball pump, you're gonna need so much oil. You're gonna have to hit up Diddy's supplier, and even then, it's not like keeping it well-oiled means you can throw revs on this without a thought. You'll just end up needing to clean the carbon buildup and keep an eye on the vacuum hoses and the cooling system. And at what point do you start punching yourself in the balls while fapping? When did sex start needing pain to be fun? RX7 FC, for the man whose kink is getting a headache and whose safe word is pass the Tylenol. Now, this is a convertible FC. Kind of unusual to find one like this. It's got headrest speakers that are controlled independently of the other speakers, along with additional bracing for the front subframe. Also, from what we found, the convertible gets factory airbags standard while the coupes didn't in 1991 because the convertible couldn't get the automatic seat belt due to a lack of a B-pillar. Because that was the rule in the early days of airbags in the United States. Either you had to have a driver's airbag or you had to have one of those automatic shoulder seat belts. But like the novelty of those seat belts, what you get out of an FC is uniqueness. It's the kind of drive that you cannot get in 2025 in the age of electrification with a style you don't see in the postmodernism of smooth edges and Fisher-Price futurism. But for as often as an FC will make your day, this car has a higher probability than most to ruin your entire week. That's why another FC came along to the shoot. Adam's buddy Dave. Now he is here in case the subject car breaks down. We have a backup FC. Not exactly the same thing though. This FC is a 3-rotor and I drove both. And after which both Adam and Dave came up to me and said, "So, which do you like better?" And I had to think about it for a minute because a 3-rotor doesn't have the lag that the turbo does. You get torque immediately, not way up in the rev range. And the 3-rotor also sounds like a lawnmower that's about to die, but you don't feel anything because it's still smooth. That is a strange feeling.
Yep.
Awesome.
So it only took 4 wires, and anything you want to know, pressures, temperatures, air-fuel ratio, it reads it all.
Yeah, so this is way linear, much more linear than the turbo. When that turbo lit, it lit. Much more expressive. Well, this is like a harsh comparison. You went 3 rotors and no turbo, or 2 rotors and 1 turbo. Yeah, right about here I want a turbo. We got a light on the dash that came up.
That's okay.
Okay.
We don't listen to that one.
All right.
Oh yeah, you need to pay more attention to more attention to your gears. Yeah, this thing is more. What was that? Oh, didn't like that?
Yeah, I don't know. Still working the kinks out.
Yeah, if you think S2000 shift it like that, then you're getting somewhere with a 3-rotor.
The 3-rotor is more entertaining, but the turbo is faster. So, in my opinion, 2 rotors with a turbo is more fun than 3 rotors naturally aspirated. But back to the 2-rotor. This used to have a clutch fan, but now it has an electric fan and a V-mount. Why? Well, this car hated having a clutch fan since you basically had to run heat and air conditioning during the summer to force air through there. And this turbo, oh man, God forbid you try to upgrade this in any way. Adam and Dave tried. They made a hybrid turbo, which is just a factory turbo with an aftermarket compressor housing. But it kept on dumping oil into the exhaust, so they removed the swap and just added a stock turbo, and then the car finally stopped throwing its toys out of the crib. Now, when Dave rescued this FC, it got the Fast and Furious treatment, unfortunately, and he's been undoing it. Originally, when he got it, the coilovers were slammed so low, the shocks basically did nothing. And worse, it had that cliche Crown Royal shift boot. That garbage was everywhere in the early 2000s, and everybody who used the Crown Royal bag as a shift boot thought that's like the millennial version of the boomer crying baby. Cut out the weeping child that you put in front of the car. Look it, it's a child having a bad time. I'm only happy when kids aren't. So why bother with an FC if it's this temperamental? Well, other than the admiration and respect from what these cars represent, I would imagine that RX-7 enthusiasts would go through the effort for 3 reasons. First is that the inconsistency of this engine can sometimes be overblown. Yeah, it's a lot of work. It eats money and time like a new relationship or an old pet. But as long as you aren't trying to get big power out of this, and by that I mean FD power, the engine should be decently reliable as long as you keep pouring 2-stroke oil into it. Maintenance is key, of course, but then that's evergreen advice. The problems tend to occur when you try to improve on what's already there, like with the hybrid swap we talked about earlier. The RX-7 is like the anti-Burger King. It doesn't want you to have it your way. It wants you to take it the way it comes. Onions, tomato, ketchup, and mayo. I don't care if you like pickles, open up wide for some cucumbers we soaked in vinegar. So there's rattling inside the roof, and parts are scarce over here because the United States convertibles didn't get the turbo. They were only standard in Japan or whatever. So get the hell over it and come hug these corners. The second reason is that RX7 FCs appear to be appreciating in value in 2025. The second generation was the black sheep of the RX-7 world. The first gen was the apple of every middle-aged eye that was slowly beginning to accept that cars could be smaller and still make power. It wasn't a Corvette, but it was the larval stage of what the Corvette represented. Men raging against the dying of the light by driving something that put back all the youth that life had drained from them. A reverse Mosquito for the dawning malaise era. The third generation, meanwhile, priced out all the younger guys who would have loved them. You could have had a first-gen RX-7 for the base price of around $7,000 in 1978. By 1993, the car was running over $32,000. And I know, inflation means that this was never a cheap car. That $7,000 price tag in 1978 would be close to $34,000 in 2025. And the 1993 price tag would be close to $70,000 in 2025. But there was an attainability to the first gen that didn't exist for the third, which makes the second generation all the more appealing. Not just the youth of its time, but the youth of today. For the base model, you were basically paying 1978 prices. It looks like the original MSRP for the base model 1991 RX-7 just the regular turbo, not convertible, was around $7,150 or just over $16,000 today. These were cheaper and began appreciating shortly after the start of this decade and all the unpleasantness that kept people indoors. They were popular for drifting and hooning, and they looked cool and they sounded cool and they were cool, but over time parts and overall availability got scarce enough that these cars are becoming expensive again, which makes it all the more valuable to have one. So what about the third reason? Well, the third reason is slightly tied to the second, but it's less mercenary. Put simply, those young guys who fell in love with the second generation now have the opportunity to recapture the Gen X vibes that are stored in the FC platform. As the story goes, the RX-7's designer, Akio Uchiyama, got his inspiration for the design from the Porsche 924, and this resulted in a car that would come to be regarded as a masterpiece of its era, in spite of its problems. It was able to unite the latchkey kids listening to violent femmes and the yuppies getting pegged by violent femmes. It's almost wholesome the way people seem to come together in common agreement about the merits of the RX-7, even in its worst moments. Because it's a car that carries with it the character of a time period that required more effort to be impressive. Today, we expect so little of the automotive industry that we're impressed anytime a car isn't shedding head gaskets or CVTs like dogs shedding their winter coats. People expect less because if the bar were any lower, it would have archaeological appeal. But you had options, and automakers actually had to try rather than simply chase trends. And look, to be perfectly fair, we have options now. We have plenty of great cars if you're willing to look for them. But those great cars seem fewer and farther between than they used to, especially as most cars feel less distinguishable between each other than ever before. And I know this is an evergreen issue as well. People in 1988 probably worried that cars were starting to feel all the same, just as the people in the 90s felt about the rise of SUVs, and people in the 2000s felt about crossovers. But the end result is more or less the same. Our past becomes more important as we get farther away from it. Encased in a perpetual amber we come to regard as the good old days. A past that, for all its imperfections, has endless appeal simply for being what the present isn't. Does that make the cars of the past better? No, but it makes them different, which in some cases is just as well.
Here's what you've been missing out on RCR's Patreon. Head over to our Patreon page and become a supporter of Regular Car Reviews. Thank you so much, and thank you for helping us have a job.
And no one used the showers in the gym class when I was in gym class, because otherwise you're gay.
Yeah. No, I don't think I've ever even heard the showers at my school turn on when I was there.
There was one guy, I think, who would like use the shower after gym class. And then I'd hear other people saying like, yo, I think he's gay. He's using the shower.